And welcome to Hannity. It is 9 o'clock on the East Coast and 8 p.m. right here in the great city of Milwaukee. We are in beautiful Wisconsin, and we are broadcasting live from inside the RNC. Now, the Republican National Convention will go on as planned after a day that Americans will never forget. Donald Trump standing tall, blood running down his face, fists clenched in the air, draped by Secret Service, captured by this now iconic photo seen around the world. And seconds earlier, a bullet pictured right there in the shocking photo pierced President Trump's ears, just millimeters away from striking him in the head in what was sure to be a fatal blow. A deranged lunatic tried and failed to assassinate Donald Trump. But in the crowd, a father of two young girls, sadly, was killed while shielding his family, and two other bystanders were seriously injured. Our prayers, they remain with them tonight. This was a dark day in American history. The soul of our country is now, in many ways, almost unrecognizable. We'll get into exactly what went wrong in just a moment, but we do begin tonight with a look at why this happened. I have long said very consistently on this program, deranged, violent individuals, they themselves are always responsible for their own actions. For example, when a Bernie Sanders superfan tried to assassinate Steve Scalise and other Republican congressmen on a baseball field, I said that you hold the person responsible who did this. I said the same thing when a man from California tried to assassinate a U.S. Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh, at his home. And, of course, the same is true of the failed Trump assassin. At the same time, the behavior, the rhetoric on the left has become progressively more ominous and more extreme. And in the process, they have dehumanized Donald Trump. They have dehumanized his family, his supporters, now for nearly a decade. They call Trump a fascist, a racist, a sexist, a monster. How many more Hitler comparisons can they make about Donald Trump? They warned he would ruin America. Democracy is on the ballot. Meanwhile, these are the same people that will, with the snap of a finger, disenfranchise millions and millions of primary voters. They breathlessly perpetrated a hoax for 3 long years, lied, conspiracy theories peddled day after day, night after night, accusing Donald Trump of being a Russian asset. They tried to delegitimize his presidency with the Mueller witch hunt. They imposed 2 bogus political impeachment proceedings. And after leaving office, Biden's weaponized DOJ, other Democratic DAs, those that ran on a platform to get Trump, and attorneys generals, they waged an unprecedented lawfare campaign against Donald Trump. They raided his house. They sued him for hundreds of millions of dollars. They filed cooked-up charges in a variety of deep blue districts across the country. And still, Donald Trump is ahead in the polls. And meanwhile, the rhetoric on the left got even more heated and more extreme. Democrats claiming Trump would end democracy. They told their followers there would not be another election. Look at the cover of this New Republic magazine. You know, New Republic depicting Donald Trump as Adolf Hitler. Prominent New York Congressman Dan Goldman saying Trump, quote, has to be eliminated. Biden saying tonight he wants the temperature lowered. Wow, really, Joe? Because in the last week alone, Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, and so many others, your wife smeared the former president. You, Joe, you yourself and your wife called Trump evil and a threat to our country. Just to remind you, take a look.
And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Trump is a threat to this nation. He says if he loses, there will be a bloodbath when he loses. And the United States Supreme Court said there is virtually no limit on the power of a president. Trump said if he wins, he'll be a dictator on day one. He means it, folks. We're not going to let that happen. Over my dead body will happen.
His own chief of staff said he called POWs and those who died in war losers and suckers. He's evil.
What Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans have made clear is that if they get into power, they will dismantle American democracy as we know it.
Someone who suggests we should, quote, terminate our Constitution should never again have the chance to stand behind a microphone and never again have the chance to stand behind the seal of the President of the United States of America.
Now, just 5 days ago at a fundraiser, Biden said, quote, "We're done talking about the debate. It's time to put Trump in a bullseye." And yesterday, someone tried to shoot Trump in the head. They went for a headshot. Let's be very clear here. Joe Biden and other top Democrats, they're not responsible for the actions of a deranged lunatic. I want to be clear. But this insane political demonization has to stop. Democrats, the state-run media mob, they need to start being honest. Donald Trump is not putting democracy in peril. He's not trying to be a dictator for life. He is running on lowering the people's taxes, generating economic growth, energy dominance, getting rid of Biden inflation, finally securing our borders, the single greatest national security threat we have. He's trying to get rid of the insanity of no bail laws and defund and dismantle and reimagine the police. Donald Trump wants to make America great for all Americans. Remember 2016? It's about the forgotten men and the forgotten women in this country. You may disagree with his politics, but enough with the lying. A cheap fake video that isn't a cheap fake video, that's not even edited. Another lie they perpetrate. And frankly, last night's weak statement from Joe Biden wasn't good enough. Tonight, not good enough. Hours after the assassination attempt, Joe finally shuffles out to a camera. Didn't have much to say. Take a look.
The idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. And everybody must condemn it. Okay?
Mr. President, do you think there was an assassination attempt?
I don't know enough to. I have an opinion, but I don't have any facts. So I want to make sure we have all the facts before I make any more comments. Thank you.
Oh, it's assassination attempt. It just isn't appropriate. If Biden wants to lower the temperature, then he can act presidential for once. He would tell the American people Donald Trump is not evil. He's not a threat to democracy. He's merely working within the confines of our Constitution, our great democratic republic, to win a second term. Biden would tell his fellow Democrats, even if you do not like his positions or his rhetoric or his style, Donald Trump is a genuine American with a large following who wants the best for the American people and the country that he loves. As former First Lady Melania Trump so eloquently stated, quote, "A monster who recognized my husband as an inhuman political machine attempted to wring out Donald's passion, his laughter, ingenuity, love of music and inspiration, the core facets of my husband's life. His human side were buried below the political machine. Donald, the generous and caring man who I have been with through the best of times and the worst of times." She goes on, "Let us remember that when the time comes to look beyond the left and the right, beyond the red and the blue, we all come from families with the passion to fight for a better life together while we are here in this earthly realm. The winds of change have arrived. For those of you who cry in support, I thank you. I commend those of you who have reached out beyond the political divide. Thank you for remembering that every single politician is a man or a woman with a loving family." As I've said for years, every Democrat, Republican, they deserve to be safe and protected. I was saying that with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. last night. I said it about Barack Obama when he was president. We settle our differences at the ballot box. We can do it without the smear and the slander that goes on and the doomsday predictions. America, when you stand back in those more sober moments in your life and you think about the blessings of liberty and the blessings of freedom, how lucky are we? What an amazing place filled with incredible people. And there are incredible people, on both sides of the aisle. The American dream is real. It is, in many ways, we're at an inflection point. And fundamentally, our system could be the greatest, best system God ever gave man if we protect it. A republic, if you can keep it, as Ben Franklin said. No country in the history of this earth has done more to advance the human condition, and still Americans across the political spectrum rightfully work toward a more perfect union. We are blessed to live in the greatest single country God gave man, and we have a responsibility to protect and preserve it for our children, for our grandchildren, and we cannot let the hatred, the lying, the smearing, the slander, the besmirching, and the vitriol get in the way. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.